Peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum. Today we have the ninth episode. It is this. Are Christians, Muslim, indigenous people ready to ask forgiveness for the sins, mistakes of the past committed by Christians, Muslim, indigenous people in contest with other groups, religions, and cultures? It is a very important point. We already, in the last few episodes, talk about this in the context of Marawi, in the context of Mindanao, but of course, here is more academic presentation. You can listen to friends, very good friends. One is our friend from UP University, Professor Wadi, that he has been also the director of the Dean of Islamic School in UP University, and we could listen to him a very scholarly presentation about this topic. Another friend that she introduced herself in the presentation. The only things I can say, she is from the mountain place of Luzon. She belonged to an indigenous people, but she introduced herself, her qualities, we can say, also say that she is part of Silsila, alumni of Silsila. We are proud of these two friends, and for sure they will tell us many important things to help us in this specific topic.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am Julkipli Wadi of the Institute of Islamic Studies at the University of the Philippines. Today I would like to share with you a topic entitled Teachings, Movements, and Experiences of Love and Hate in Islam. Let me begin by making some qualifications. The phrase love and hate in Islam must be qualified. Love is a paramount teaching of every religion. But hate in Islam, it cannot be. Religion cannot teach hate, as it is contradictory to its nature. If there appears to be hate-related teachings in Islam, as expressed in movements, in history, or in various social or human experiences, they have to be understood in context, in space-time dimension, or as historical experience in Muslim society. So, I guess a better title would be Love and Hate in Muslim Society, Teachings, Movements, and Experiences. We say this because religion is normative, while society is capable of experiencing various forms of history or events. By normative, we mean religion can envision certain ideals, while society could be entangled in certain historical or human experiences that may come in the form of events or any forms of encounters. So in this subject, or in this discussion, we would like to at least explore some of the following questions. What is love? Why, despite the centrality of love in Islamic teachings, Muslim society and movements have varied experience of love and hate through time? How do such dialectic of love and hate define Muslim society in various phases of history? Why do religions could at times be associated with hate? Yet, why are their teachings sought as source of love and compassion? And finally, what are the challenges in promoting love among religions these days. So these are the questions we would like to answer or at least explore in our subsequent presentations. Now, to do that, allow me to advance some assumptions. First, the frequently quoted cliche that Islam is based on peace and justice and Christianity is based on love is not necessarily true. Such a cliche is too compartmentalizing, as if Islam does not promote love or Jesus does not teach peace and justice. Second, love is central in the teachings of Islam. Al-Wadud, the loving, is one of the divine names. And creation is an expression of the divine attributes of the loving God. Third, is or divine love, or sometimes also referred to hub in Arabic, is a perennial tenet in Islamic mystical tradition, with numerous spiritual orders and personalities promoting it across time. Fourth, the propensity to hate amongst men and women is due to dominance of lower self, the nafsul ammara. We will explain this concept a little bit. Next, religion, when transformed to ideology, while defined with certain forces of social environment, could espouse both personal and collective hate, as shown with the rise of radical takfiri groups around the world. This is magnified with the next assumption, with increasing global structure of power and hegemony that elicits radical religious groups to rise as they deconstruct teachings of religion and engage what is generally considered as terrorism. And finally, I guess, and I think this is also the view of many, that media is culprit into sensationalized portrayal of hate and terrorism, with Islam often drugged indiscriminately while projecting it as a global menace rather than promoting the Islamic traditions and experience of love and compassion amongst our peoples. So these are the assumptions we would like to advance in this presentation, and we will explore further as we move along. Let me present a simple framework of our understanding about love, or the concept of love and hate. Love and hate as human emotions, in my view, is located in the nafs, or the self. Love as other side of hate, or vice versa. Or love and hate can be viewed as a spectrum of emotions, similar to that of hue of colors. Say between black and white, there is a range of colors in between, say gray, light gray, etc. As love can mean kindness, passion, lust, etc., etc. In color psychology, hues is understood to be determinant of human behavior. For instance, the red color, or say blue color, had certain attraction to certain types of people, just as other people may like color like, say, gray or black, and so on. So color psychology provides certain correlations of how the dynamics of colors influence human behavior. We mention this because the concept of nafs, or the self, may be viewed as moving hues or dynamic mix of varying colors we call emotions. Such that if love dominates naps, the person is loving. If it is hate, then that person is hateful. Or in many other types of attributes or emotions that a person may carry. There is also a grade of naps. A reason why there are behaviors among men and women that are considered to be good, and when viewed in another light, which could also be considered to be bad. The naps is usually identified as that, for lack of a better term, that elan vital, that energy in man that either drags him down or elevates him to carry certain human traits. The lower type of naps is known as the animalistic spirit or the animalistic soul or the napsul ammara. A person that is operating or which is dominated by napsul ammara or animalistic spirit carries negative traits, hate, and all those bad attitude. That is why a person should soar and elevate himself to another level, and that is the rational self or the rational soul, and it is called napsul lawama. That is, reason is the primary entity in human being. It is what makes a person rational. In other words, he could identify bad and wrong and make supposedly good or right choices. But sometimes, a person operating or within this realm is dominated by these naps could still be mediated between the lower self and the higher self. That is, even if a person is already having good traits, at times he can also commit wrong. In other words, there is vacillation, there is ambiguity in this state. In other words, even the most righteous person can at times be subjected to or gripped by hate because he is mediating between two forces. That's why that person should still soar higher to reach that stage of the naps called napsul mutmainna, or a soul at peace. That is, if a person is in that state, he has higher degree of self-control. Therefore, his or her propensity to hate is minimized, if not totally put in the right place. So therefore, the naps can address or could explain the concept of love and hate. And oftentimes, these naps, including the expressions of emotions, can be seen in one's words or in one's acts. In this regard, morality cannot just be viewed as something natural. Morality or ethics is a choice. And love can be also viewed as object of spiritual quest. In other words, it is something that can be opted to as man's quest to define his life. If a person is in that state of love or loving, Then again, he has high degree of self-control, which many religions speaks as a method, effective method in addressing hate. When translated to a larger realm, this concept may provide us vision of just society, including moral governance, including the ideals of world peace as alternative to collective hate, like what we witness in many forms, such as racism, ultranationalism, Nazism, Zionism, and many others. So what we are saying, what is supposedly just a personal emotion could be translated into a source of collective hate, especially so if it is used as ideology of certain people or community. Now, the next part of our discussion would be a kind of what I call a attempt to make some understanding or the elements of love. We consider this as Aristotelian because this idea of love is being classified into many forms. And it is usually understood or conceived using Greek terms. The first is philia. It is a form of love that is intimate, characterized with authentic friendship. In Tagalog, maybe we can use the term matalik na kaibigan. Or in Tausug, which is the next language I know, the Bahasa Sug, is bagay lakda. In other words, a person who we consider as matalik na kaibigan is a person with philia. The next type is love that is playful or flirtatious. In Tagalog, maybe this is close to malandi. Or maybe in Tausug, mabaya. Although the term mabaya may also take a non-flirtatious theme. But to a degree, when we speak of lodus, that is characterized by being flirtatious or being playful to another person. The next form or type of love is romantic or passionate love. In Tagalog, maybe this is what we call mapagmahal. Although not everything who is or everyone who is mapagmahal is always passionate, is always romantic. In Tausug, we may call that tugul lasa. So passionate about love, about this love. The next type is storge, unconditional or familial love. Maybe for lack of better term, this is what we call in Tagalog as taos puso. Or in Tausug as malasa. That is storge. The other category is philautia or self-love. In Tagalog, we call that makasarili. Or in Tausug, we may call that as buhi baran. A person who is only concerned of himself. So he is makasarili. He is always looking at his interests, not others. The other types of love is pragma, or committed, or companionate. Maybe in Tagalog, we call this marubdub. So, marubdub na pagmamahal. It's very companionate, it's very committed. In Tausug, we may call it patibagayon. That is a person who is friendly, is committed to his friendship with other people. And finally, we have the last category, the agape. It means emphatic or universal love. Maybe that is what is known in Tagalog as pagmamahal sa sangkatauhan, or in Tausug, kasilasa apyapanjari. So these are the 7 categories of love, which, for lack of better term, are all human love. We call this Aristotelian because the concept is categorized into different typologies or types. But the question is, how about the idea of platonic love? I think some of us, or many of us, have come across these notions of platonic love. It is a love that is ideal, that is beyond the um, level of being physical. And we may also ask, where does love come from? And what is the highest form of love? Now, as answer to that, there is in Islamic tradition a discourse, a very important area of knowledge called divine love, or is, or who. So this is the subject that we would like to discuss. Because all these 7 categories of love are universal. They are all capable of being experienced by human being, whether one is a Muslim, a Jew, a Christian, a Hindu, an atheist, and so on and so forth. But what is that unique understanding of the highest form of love in Islam? So I think this is what is being required of us as our discussion by Father Sebastiano. So, before defining what is divine love, let me quote Omid Safi, a professor in the United States, in his work Radical Love, Teachings from the Islamic Mystical Tradition, published in 2008. This is what he writes, and I quote: "Nowadays, when we speak about love, we almost exclusively refer to romantic love. But for the mystics, love is light. Love comes unabashedly, radiantly in 1,000 different shades and colors that still blend into one. There is love of the friend, the neighbor, the child, of the parent, the lover, the stranger, of God and the prophets, of saints and sinners, love of the self, love of the enemy, of nature, of realms seen and unseen, and more. For these mystics, love is fire. It is a purifying fire that burns away selfishness, greed, anger, ego, and leaves behind nothing but God." This is a work that I have read quite recently by Professor Omid Safi, one famous faculty member in a university in the United States. Let us take another subject and look at the phenomenon of the rise of hate groups and radicals. Because it's quite ironic, as we said, that Islamic thought is so rich in spirituality, including the discussions on subject like love, including more specific one like divine love. But yet, in Islamic history, there is the preponderance of hate groups and radicals. There are many of them, but we could at least only identify the major ones, namely the Khawarij. The Khawarij were considered to be the early extremists in the 7th century. or right, 6th or 7th century. They rose because they went out from the main fold of the Islamic community. It was due to their opposition to the fourth caliph, Imam Ali. When Imam Ali tried to agree or agreed to an arbitration with his enemy, Muawiyah. And the Khawarij, who later became the Khawarij, his early followers, did not agree with that. They said that arbitration can only come from God. And they considered the arbitration advanced by Ali as capitulations. So therefore, Ali must have committed a sin. So they came up with the fatwa that anyone who commits a sin is an unbeliever and must be killed. So Imam Ali was actually assassinated. And that was the beginning of fitna or schism, of what becomes the followers of Imam Ali, later on known to be Shia, versus the mainstream Sunni. And there is a third group called the Khawarij. So the Khawarij had been prominent in various phases of history, not only in the 7th century but 8th and 9th century onward, even until these days. That is why groups that espouse radicalism and extremism and interpret in rather unconventional way, particularly the use of takfir, the declarations of a person as unbeliever, they are called neo-Kharijites or the neo-Khawarij. So there are many groups today that are in the categories of so-called neo-Khawarij. So they are called, at least in our language, as the radicals, the extremists, the terrorists, and so on. Now there's another group, at least in the 13th century, known as the assassins. They are also extreme. This is a branch of Shia, the Ismailis, who wage war and violence against political authority. Instead of coming up with alternative, they instead went to the mountains and launched assassination. In fact, the term assassination comes from this term, the hashish, assassinin, comes from this term, assassin, because they use illegal drugs, hashish, in order to derange the young, and they would be indoctrinated to kill someone, to engage in assassination. So they are called the assassins. According to some sources, they were only defeated by the Mongols. But at any rate, they were the enemies during the Seljuk dynasty. So these are just example of 8 groups that emerge in various phases of Islamic history. As we said, they resonate today's radical groups that come in different phases in many parts of the world. Now, obviously, the difference between the old group or groups and the today's groups is the context. Obviously, in the old days, the relationship among polities or big powers is that of imperial relationship. That is a war between, say, empires, dynasty against dynasty. So it is just inevitable that other groups should emerge in those times. For one, there was no international law or United Nations in those times. But this is different in our time. There is a what you call a global structure of power dominated by big powers. There is international law that supposedly regulate the affairs of states, and there is supposedly United Nations that set the rules of nations. But these big powers have the monopoly of technology, particularly those instruments of violence and war. And these are the same armaments that are being transferred to Muslim countries, and in turn, some of these armaments reach to the hands of the radicals. So supposedly, the radicals who are simply Salafis in their mindset, who are simply Khawarij in their mindset, are now militarized because of the presence of arms and ammunitions. So this is what is dangerous in our time. Not only the radicalizations of the Salafi, of the Khawarij, but the militarizations of themselves, making them potent or dangerous force in the world. And this expedite the fragmentations of the Muslim world. The heartland of Islam is now divided into different countries and orientations and divisions. War after war that happens in the Middle East. And as a result of this war, there is international migration. Many of these immigrants are forced to go to the United States, to Europe, and elsewhere, and build new communities. So it's ironic that Islam, the heartland of Islam, is weakening at the center, but it is advancing and rising at the periphery. This is the real realities of our time. And partly, this is due to the rise of, we call the Salaf, these orthodox groups that hardly reconcile with modernity and other liberal or progressive ideas. Although not all Salaf carry anti-modern sentiments. Some of them are progressive also. But to a degree, it is responsible in increasing what Bassam TV, a known professor of international relations, what he refers to as world disorder. So the rise of radical groups that is armed with long entrenched traditions of being hate groups, with the fact that it is operating in a global, highly globalized structure of power, where many big powers are engaged in the proliferations of arms and ammunitions, making therefore these groups, these new hate groups, as dangerous. So we are then back into square one. We see therefore a kind of a polarizing trajectory in Islamic thought of a beautiful teachings like divine law, while Muslim community is suffering from a kind of a collective hate that is advanced by certain group. So how do we reconcile that? The seeming polarizing dynamic of love and hate, it is present in Muslim society. I think we have to return into the metaphor of hidden treasure if we try to, in a sense, understand this dynamic. On one hand, the world could be viewed as a veil. If we only look at the world in its superficialities, that is in the way events unfold in history, where we do not look into inner meaning or symbolic meaning of history, then we will see just the world as it is. The world that is dominated by power structure, by those who want to dominate others, by those who hate, by those who refuse to embrace mercy and compassion. So we will suffer like others in the same dilemma, what I call the hardening of curtain. That is, we are not able to remove the veil. Instead, we are creating more curtain as blindfolds of our eyes. So it makes the way we look at the world very gloomy, because we will look at the world with the prism of hate rather than love. In this regard, we have to reimagine the world. I think going back to the idea of the metaphor of hidden treasure, we have to have that ability to understand difficulty and see higher wisdom in the difficulty we experience, and harness the potentials of this wisdom in order for us to be able to transform hate to love. That is, that we will develop in our psyche as part of our spirituality, that the world is not dominated by hate, war, and violence. That the other side of this experience is the predominance of love, compassion, and mercy. Thank you very much. Thank you for your interest in this subject, and thank you also to Father Sebastiano de Ambra for inviting me to share this important topic. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Joe Kipley. Of course, I enjoy to listen to you, and listening to you, I felt to be in my school in the Pontifical Institute for Islamic Arabic Studies in Rome when I studied long ago. And I enjoy all the lesson, especially about Sufism, just to encourage our listener, our friend, our participants on the summer course to bring some idea in their own personal sharing. I like to listen your word of wisdom. Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Father. I think what you had started in this Salsila is something that is worthwhile. It has to be emulated by other communities. The fact that the Silsila had been established as institutions for many years, it had continued to exist through your active leadership. Although I should understand the difficulty along the way, given your varied experiences in promoting the spirit of dialogue amongst people, and it's quite understandable because of the long historical context as far as interfaith relations and intra-communal relation. I guess in our time, it doesn't matter how big or small what we accomplish. I think so long as we have that pure heart of serving others, that would still make a difference. doing this in the time of pandemic is doubly hard because we are not all familiar with technology. But yet, because I think you are so driven, the spirit of love is with you. So you are reaching out. If only not to break the traditions of the summer course program of the CC. So again, Father Sebastiano, I congratulate you with that, including the other staff.
Thank you, Jewel, for your kind words of friendship. I think all of us have many good points. In the heart of each person, I believe, there is a goodness. Okay, take care and
thank you, Father.
mapadayon. Salamat kayo.
Salamat.
Bye.
Padayon.
Peace and blessings. I greet you with joy from the Mountain Province, Cordillera Administrative Region. This is Genevieve Balance Kupang, a Kankanaay, a co-author of World Religions and Belief Systems, published by CNE Publishing House, and a book series titled Our Nation, Our World, published by SIBS Publishing House. I am the chair of the Special Interest Groups of the World Council for Curriculum and Instruction, a trustee of the Social Science Institute, and a core team member of the CBCP Episcopal Commission on Interreligious Dialogue, and a board member of SANIWA, Network of Advocates for Indigenous Peoples and Moral Rights. The question is, are IPs, Muslims, and Indigenous peoples ready to seek forgiveness for the sins, mistakes of the past committed by Christians, Muslims, and Indigenous peoples in context with other groups, religions, and culture? Father Seb requested me to focus on the IPs, or Indigenous peoples. Well, the Indigenous peoples in general have been the victims of domination, prejudice, discrimination, land grabbing, resulting to displacement, poverty, violence, misappropriation, and commodification of indigenous cultures. Sometimes, the budget for their or our development is hard to come by. Nowadays, however, there are committed, learned Indigenous leaders who lobby to get a greater share in the pie of the budget for national sustainable progress for the well-being and preservation of the Indigenous people, cultures, and way of life. In some cases, however, the Indigenous leaders themselves have been the problem for many reasons. Usually, the number one problem, like in the mainstream society, corruption is the number one problem. The unrestrained desire for material gains, land grabbing of communal lands at the expense of the innocent members of the Indigenous people's community. Sometimes, instead of being the ones protecting the common good, the local Indigenous people suddenly would realize and find that their communal lands have been declared as personal properties by those who are in power, like corporations or those who are elected to govern, who are either non-IPs or Indigenous peoples themselves. And that is what is sad and disgusting. At times, the learned Indigenous peoples or those educated in universities are even the ones who would declare some portions of the communal land as their private properties. And that is why we advocate for vigilance so that the territory in possession of a community remains to be enjoyed by all and not only by a few. You know for a fact that land is life to the Indigenous peoples. It is their source of livelihood, medicine, and ritual spaces for our well-being. What are the issues faced by Indigenous peoples, either imposed by Christians, Christian colonizers or other religious groups even. Several aspects of contemporary society have placed the indigenous peoples in a precarious situation. As global minorities, today's indigenous peoples experience not only physical harm but also socio-economic marginalization. The following are some of the threats and dangers that indigenous peoples face. The first one is displacement. Because of our reverence for and affinity with nature, indigenous peoples generally occupy areas which are teeming with natural resources. Our ancestral lands are often exploited by corporations and businesses such as mining and logging companies. The activities of these corporations often result in the disruption of our agricultural activities and other well-being of the community. Many indigenous peoples are displaced from our ancestral lands because we or they are forcibly driven out by these companies. In the Philippines, one major concern involves the activities of mining companies affecting indigenous communities in Mindanao, Palawan, the Cordilleras, where I stay, Nueva Vizcaya, and other parts of the country. Indigenous peoples may also be displaced by armed conflict. In Mindanao, historic conflict between government forces, Moro groups, and the New People's Army have displaced tens of thousands of people. In fact, many of them are also in Metro Manila as Bakwits. This phenomenon of repeated large-scale displacements has been named Bakwit by the people of Mindanao, a colloquialization of the word evacuate. Violence is the second threat to the lives of indigenous peoples. For all indigenous groups who depend on agriculture for our livelihood, land is sacred. In the struggle for our land, tensions can arise and situations can quickly escalate to violence. A prominent case of such violence occurred on September 1, 2015 when members of the paramilitary group Magahat Bagani killed Emerito Samarca, the executive director of the Alternative Learning Center for Livelihood Development, or ALCADEV, an institution that provides basic and technical education to Lumad children. After killing Samarca, the armed men then publicly executed Junel Campos and Aurelio Cinzo. Campos was chairman of Maluhatayong Pakigbisog, Alyansa sa Sumusunod, or MAPUSA, an indigenous people's collective known for defending ancestral land and campaigning against human rights violation against indigenous peoples. To date, harassments leading to deaths against indigenous peoples living in the Amazon, so that's in the other part of the world, Pantaron Range in Mindanao, and other ancestral domains throughout the world is on the rise. The third is misappropriation and commodification of indigenous cultures. The indigenous peoples have historically been generous with our knowledge and culture, as we consider that knowledge are not private property, but as a collective good that must be shared for the benefit of all. In recent years, entrepreneurs have sought to capitalize on the increasing popularity of indigenous knowledge and culture. Many Western companies have been patenting traditional medicines without giving due recognition to the indigenous groups from whom these medicines originated. This has resulted in the indigenous people's growing demand that our traditional knowledge be recognized and protected. Indigenous culture itself is also often misappropriated by the social majority, particularly in Western society. Indigenous art, design, stories and legends, music, and even the portraits of indigenous peoples are used in marketing and advertising or even as sports mascots. The territories of indigenous peoples are increasingly seen as desirable tourist attractions. Not only are such profit-driven endeavors exploitative of our cultures, but they also perpetrate the racist stereotype that the indigenous peoples are backward or primitive. Indigenous peoples are the original inhabitants of a particular area as opposed to migrating or having been brought there at previous point in time. Indigenous peoples observe traditions which have resisted assimilation into the cultures of the colonizers. So, as to our belief systems, these are pre-colonial ancestral traditions that are still practiced up to today in the contemporary times. These indigenous religions or belief systems may not include influences from Western culture or major global religions. As we already know or have observed or read, most indigenous religions are animistic, which means that we attribute spiritual or supernatural qualities to plants, animals, and even inanimate objects in nature, like a big rock. Indigenous religions and the people who practice them are almost always minorities in their respective countries. Although many indigenous peoples, like me, for example, who grew up in an indigenous community, I had been schooled in Catholic schools and had teachers who are missionaries. And so eventually we also have embraced Christianity or Catholicism specifically in my case. For the interest of time, let me proceed with finding a common ground to building solidarity with IPs. The main gist of the topic 9 has to do with forgiveness, but I would like us to see this, that non-IPs must respect and value the seeds of knowledge of global indigenous peoples. There is so much to learn, especially with regards to harmonious coexistence with the rest of creation. We talk very much of environmental stewardship, and we indigenous peoples have learned to live in harmony with nature. And perhaps that is one thing that secularized societies have to learn from us. The need for indigenous people to be heard and for our wisdom to be shared that are supportive of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and to aid communities in healing and maintaining our well-being. Indigenous peoples coming together to share spiritual practices, history and culture, build relationships, and create pathways forward to protect and preserve indigenous ways, including the right to practice spiritual and cultural ways to preserve and protect ancestral lands and sacred sites, and share the collective wisdom of indigenous to address the environmental and social violations affecting our global society today. There is also a need to provide opportunities for research and advocacy of indigenous rights and inclusion, to end exploitative practices and policies by governments, corporations, and organizations of indigenous people worldwide, and inclusion in interfaith dialogue and partnership. I would like to say that our leader in the Catholic Church, Pope Francis, has actually advanced a lot of dialogue with regards the issues of indigenous peoples. Here in the Mountain Province, they have what we call tungtungan. Tungtungan by the indigenous people's elders and the catechists and priests and nuns of the Catholic groups, along with other like-minded Christians who want to do the dialogue so that practices or cultural wealth that we deem important can be preserved, and also at the same time respecting the religious beliefs of Christians, for example. So thank you for listening, and I'd like to leave you with greetings of peace, joy, and well-being. Maraming salamat po. Iyaman, we call Iyaman here in the Mountain Province. Maraming salamat po.
We heard about this topic and to ask forgiveness. I think this is a very important topic. I think on personal level, on community level, the idea of forgiveness is important. I share to the bishops in the Philippines an idea related to this topic, and I said probably we can have the day of pardon. It is not new in the experience of the Church. Even Pope Paul John II in the year 2000, he did officially in St. Peter the year of 2000 was the Great Jubilee. Hopefully on the level, on national level, on local level, we can have the day of pardon, even asking forgiveness each other in a group, in a community, in a parish, in a diocese, and asking forgiveness to have a day of pardon. It's to recognize mistake, but with the hope to move together as a human fraternity, as this is our dream.